Listeners, welcome back to Tales of Abundance. Why settle for less? We are sadly missing Dr. John today, but we got Anthony and myself, so I think you're in good hands. Anthony, we doing good today?
Doing good, even though my right AirPod isn't working, but I think I can survive, so we're doing okay.
Okay. All right. Well, later we are going to have Johnny Sutton on, who, if you remember, we did a part one with Johnny that was fantastic. We got a lot of good feedback, so we're going to be doing a part two with Johnny here in just a little bit. But in the meantime, Anthony, we're going to just talk about as we're calling this, the abundance briefing, instead of current events at the beginning of the show, we're going to change it to abundance briefing, the XPRIZE. And uh, we talked about this. In fact, we tried to record it last week, and we had some technical difficulties. What are your takeaways on the X Prize, or do you want to kind of explain to people what it is?
Well, it's a Peter Diamandis and a gang of very influential technologists and entrepreneurs have figured out a way to pool resources and to give opportunity to people that are underfunded or unfunded to search for what they call moonshots, which are um, s- successes or revelations or inventions that can solve some of the world's biggest issues, whether it's removing carbon from the atmosphere, figuring out how to get rid of plastics in the ocean, gigantic problems um, that we're faced, and also inventions that we haven't thought about. It's an extremely ambitious group. There've been multiple successes, um, not as many commercially viable that they would like to see, but it's a giant fund of tens of millions of dollars, depending on the subject matter, that gives an opportunity to people that otherwise wouldn't have that opportunity because of funding to go after these things. So I think it's a virtuous group. Its goals are limitless, and I'm sure we'll see some great successes from it in the long run.
And this isn't a new concept, right? Like this was, the Peter Diamandis is the one that runs this, but his inspiration goes back to Lindbergh crossing the Atlantic or flying from New York to Paris in
Right.
the spirit of St. Louis, and that goes back just doing some quick research, but in 1919, Raymond Ortigue, he was a Frenchman that had a hotel in St. Louis. He came up with this prize and offered a $25,000 reward for whoever could fly from New York to Paris in either direction. And a lot of people tried to win this, and that was why Lindbergh crossed the Atlantic in the first prize. So, or first place. So now, if we talk about some of the things that are going on, like give people a specific example. I mean, I know there's lots of these you're interested in, but what's a specific example of one that you find interesting, Anthony?
Well, there's some active ones that are huge. There's a $119 million prize out there if someone can solve the water scarcity issue, um, either through seawater desalination or other ways. Um, there's $100 million healthspan um, prize looking for ways to not just extend the healthy human lifespan, but to make um, the last part of the health span, uh, functional and enjoyable. And then everyone's excited about, the wildfire prize. We've been touched by that terribly this year, um, all over the world. And the idea there is to use space-based wildlife detection and autonomous response. So that brings us into robotics and AI and so on and so forth. So those are three that are on my radar that I think are just amazing. And imagine if you could make progress on any and all of those, what the impact would be to um, the world, literally.
Yeah, like you referenced the X Prize for health span, and for those on YouTube, you can see this, but $101 million is the prize. And look at the teams. So it's a 7-year contest. The winners are it'll pay out 101 million, but 749 teams are currently in this, right? Um, and the vision, we ensure a future where innovative solutions meet the needs of an aging populations and shifting healthcare demands. Precision medicine breakthroughs revolutionize individualized patient care, while healthcare systems shift from reactive treatment to proactive, equitable care. Blah blah blah. Anyway, it's a pretty cool that they could, for 101 million, you get, what was it, 700 and
Yeah.
749
Oh,
teams, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, this is, it really, you may be at, listeners may be asking, why are we talking about it? This is creating abundance, right? This is absolutely creating abundance across multiple areas, subject matters, things that impact us, things that impact people outside of the United States, those that may be uh, unable to, have the local talent or technology or resources to go after and attack some of these things. So if the teams that are working on these prizes can solve those problems in an efficient and effective way, can just have a tremendous impact on the universe. So I think it's just um, they should
Yeah.
get credit just for trying, in my opinion.
Yeah,
That's my honest
the
opinion.
water scarcity one is another big one, right? Because we have so much water in the world. I think I heard a stat recently that of all of the available water we have on Earth, that we're only using 0.5%, so or one half of 1% is what goes toward our drinking water. The vast majority of the water is just almost unavailable. So here, there's a 5-year contest for a $119 million prize, and they have 679 teams working on it. And basically, it's being just the summary. I won't read the whole thing, but it's how do you take salt water and turn it into clean drinking water and do it using minimal energy and keeping the price down. But just a lot of really great challenges. So I would encourage people go to xprize.org and look at it. And I think it gives me hope. I think, wow, if we can solve these problems, and there's one for wildfires, and there's a whole bunch of them on there. Uh, let's talk about robots. This has been a fairly something we've talked about, and I, man, when you search for robots, there is so much stuff that comes up, just over and over. But here's a Chinese EV maker, Xpeng, who I don't know, but evidently they're massive, and they're going all in on humanoid robots. As we have Tesla and Figure are the big US companies. And what did we say, Anthony? There's like 50 other companies, or when we were talking about this before, something like that.
There's something like that, and I got to tell you, I was reading an article this morning, and I can't remember if it was Forbes or where it was, and they listed, no, it was an accounting firm, big accounting firm. I'll remember it in a minute here, but they listed 500, the 500 fastest growing private companies in the United States. And I can't tell you, I didn't get through all 500, but just looking at the top 100, dozens of them are robotics companies. If they're not AI companies, they're robotics. Um, or some form of software. And so what I took away from that is these companies are going to interlace what they generate in AI, what they generate in software, chip making, and it's going to have a tremendous effect on robotics, both humanoid robotics, which I sent you guys an article this morning about the BMW factory in the United States that builds X3s. They just decommission their humanoid robots because they want to relaunch with the new version where they've solved many of the problems. But they've proven that you can use a humanoid robot, not just the arms that weld things and things like that, but you can actually have a humanoid robot that can go pick up a piece of sheet metal, drop it onto the table where that welding machine is, and within you know with high capability, high success rates, 99 point something success rate of getting it exactly where it has to be within tolerance, um, they can be successful at it. So you and I have had, a little bit of fun with robotics in the past, where everyone's excited about robot folding your laundry. I think that's cute. I think it's unnecessary. I think I would rather guys figure out how to do difficult human tasks having been in automobile manufacturing plants and other plants that take the dangers and the wear and tear away from humans and puts them on, call it a robot, call it a machine, call it a combination of a humanoid robot and a machine, whatever you want to call it. I think those are the advances that are going to really change our productivity and enhance people's health. Um, yeah, and there may be a ton of money in, laundry folding robots. That doesn't interest me very much. This other stuff does. The article we talked about, the robot that's the size of a pea, or less than the size of a pea, that they're inserting into right now into animals to m- with the use of a magnet drag that to a place where they can conquer cancerous cells using that that robot, either through some form of radiation that only goes to that spot. So you have this giant machine in a BMW factory, and then you have this thing that looks like a speck of dust that's going to be traveling through your body that might be able to cure a cancerous tumor. So I just think it's so exciting. That excites me. That makes me feel good about where technology is going.
Yeah, I think it's all of those, right? Like, if somebody wants it to make their life easier because it can load and unload the dishwasher or fold their laundry, who knows what that frees them up to do? That's fine. But if it can cure cancer, better yet, or, the robot that can just go into a place and do a dangerous rescue, or, run into a fire or a hazardous area, like, there's lots of benefits to humanity, right? And, one of the challenges seems to be population. A lot of countries are shrinking and there's demand, a need for workers. You know, true abundance, Elon Musk says that in 10 or 20 years, humans are all going to be, we're not going to have to choose like UBI, that we're just all going to basically be rich because robotics will and AI will demonetize everything and make everything so cheap and so easy. I mean, what he's envisioning is that making the robots making the cars, the robots making the food, delivering it. I know uh, Amazon, or not Walmart, and your company Zipline that you love, right? That
Yep.
they kind of got started delivering drugs and saving lives in Africa. They're working with all kinds of countries or companies in the U.S. delivering a burrito on Chipotle. We talked about that on a previous time, but now multiple stores. I think it was 14 or 15. Somebody have to fact check me on that exactly, but different Walmarts are going to be doing drone deliveries. I think some are like
Yeah.
in San Antonio, not that far from us, that they're doing drone deliveries and delivering stuff within an hour or two. I mean, there's so many things, right? I mean, but I would like both. I would like the one to work around my house and the one to make everything else so much easier.
Yeah, just as long as the engineers working on on AI and the software and robotics and Elon Musk. If Elon Musk is emptying his dishwasher, that I want him to have a robot. Those are the people that I want to have free time to continue to invent and advance humanity. So Anthony's dishwasher. Who cares? And I know I'm being silly about it, but the I don't want to overlook um, the real incredible impact that technology in general is having in the acceleration. Um, you know, it's just amazing to me how fast things are moving. Gemini now is the leading chat, the LLM, and tomorrow, Grok will pass it. And back in the day, back in the 2000s, when the iPhone got invented and released, and the iPod, there were years between revisions to those things. Now it seems to be revisions are coming through and advances are coming through hourly. It's just incredible what's happening. So I'm really excited about. what's taking place.
I,
Um, and I did send the list of fast-growing companies to my son so he could give it to his kids someday. That's where they should be applying for jobs. Now you're talking about companies that are growing, 1,500% annually. I mean, it's just incredible what's going on. So right in front of us.
it's yeah, it's exciting, right? Like I mean, things are moving. It's almost like all of these things. I think we're underestimating how fast things are changing because it isn't just robotics, it's AI, it's new materials, it's healthcare. All of these things are happening simultaneously and they're all speeding each other up and leveraging each other. It's almost like Ray Kurzweil talks about the singularity. I can understand we're getting close. We're getting really
Yeah.
close. And I, I love the world where people don't have to work. Now that creates a new challenge, but the fact where robots are doing everything and you can just live and pursue whatever you want and everybody is basically wealthy because look, right now poor people live better than kings and queens lived in the old days, right? Like they have way more technology, way better lives, indoor plumbing, etc. Well, I think people in the future are going to live, even the poor people are going to live better than how the rich people live now. Might be some tough times, some bloodshed in between, but that's where we're going. So, true
Well, let's
opinion.
not take it down. I think there's enough good in the world that this technology that's being harnessed will be in the hands of good more than it'll be in the hands of bad. And um, whatever, if someone's got ill thoughts or ill actions that they want to take, I think the world will overpower them. We'll know before they know that that's what they want to do because the technology is predictive. So.
There's
I'm very hopeful.
That's
I
been
may
true
not
of
live to
every
see it, but I'm
Well, that's been true of every technology in history, right? Like almost every
right.
technology, there's a use for good, there's a use for evil. And I'm with you. I think there's way more good people than there are evil people. And it seems to have been that way throughout all of history. It's just now we're
You
playing
know,
with a little bigger stakes.
since the first guy took a rock to another rock, technology has begun advancing from that moment forward. With fire and the wheel and so on and so forth. And you look back on that, you say, "Oh, is that really technology?" Hell yeah, it's technology. It's advances.
Yeah.
It's using tools to you know make life easier and make life better. And we're just now in a place. And I'm sure the acceleration, it felt like acceleration to them when they figured out fire, right? Oh my God, this is amazing. It's happened so quickly. Um, but to me, nothing compares to what's going on right now. So
Well,
very excited.
even energy, just in the last couple days, I've heard things about there's a new nuclear process that's safer and can't melt down, and they're replacing the rods with little balls or something. I don't fully understand that. But also, both Bezos, Musk, and I think somebody else are talking about putting these really efficient solar reactors in orbit, beaming the energy down, or having data centers in space. And Elon Musk just said a couple days ago, it was something like 100 gigawatts per year he thinks will be, I forget, starting in a couple of years, but they'll be able to add 100 gigawatts per year of solar arrays in space with these data centers. To put that in perspective, I think the US only has like 400 to 450, so that'd be like 25% of the US, or 25% of all US production going into space, adding, you know, within a couple of years on an annual basis. So that's pretty
Yeah.
exciting too, and solves a lot of other choke point problems there.
Well, if it was up to Elon, we would put 100% of our resources into solar. Every bit of research, every bit of development should be in solar because of the absolute mass of the sun. Um, yes, nuclear is an option, but it can't produce um, it, it can't produce as much energy as the sun, no matter how many of those things you build. So how he's always far to an extreme,
Right.
but you know,
Well,
if I'm placing a bet. I'm placing a bet over there.
So in our universe, or our, no, not our universe, sorry, our solar system, in our solar system, the sun makes up 99.8% of the total energy. So if you
Yep.
take all of the energy coming from Earth, Jupiter, comets, asteroids, everything else in this solar system, it's a rounding error. It still rounds up to 100% of energy comes from the sun. And
I think he said if you burned Jupiter as fuel, it would be 1/10 of 1% of the energy of the sun.
right, right. It's a rounding error, right? So,
Yeah.
and I've heard multiple people now talking about a Dyson sphere. Like people used to say in the future we could have a Dyson sphere. By the way, would be something that we would in essence surround the sun, capture all of its energy, and then have who knows what windows that opens up with basically unlimited energy. But
Yep.
this seems to be like, I mean, it might be 100 years in the future or 200 years in the future, but that seems like it might be possible at some point. So we are living in the future, and I think it's all coming
Exciting
together.
times.
Uh, any last words here, Anthony, before we go to Johnny?
No, I think we covered it. I'm excited about the two topics that we touched on. Um, I'm looking forward to see what happened next. I'd advise our listeners and viewers to, you know, look, get your news feed straight. Put the XPRIZE in your news feed, put robotics in your news feed, and keep up with things that are going on. Because if you don't keep up with it, it's going to pass you by. So,
Or just
uh,
keep coming back to Tales of Abundance. That's why they download and subscribe so that we can give them updates every week and keep them in the
yeah,
know.
go to our YouTube channel and subscribe and help us out there.
Yep.
And
All right.
talk to you next time.
Listeners, we will be back after the break with Johnny Sutton on a part two. Hope you enjoy. Hey, it's Randy from Tales of Abundance. Is starting a business part of your journey? Do you have ambition but no clear path? Maybe you feel trapped in your current career. Do you want a real business that can produce $250,000 or more income for you and your family? We have an opportunity for a profitable business that can be part of your path to abundance. I want to personally invite you to see the proven system we've built. It's designed to give you that freedom and control you've been searching for. Visit premiumcabinets.com/abundance to learn more. That's premiumcabinets.com/abundance. All right, listeners, welcome back to Tales of Abundance, Why Settle for Less? I'm still here with John Oberg and Anthony Marino, and back for his second time, Glutton for Punishment, Johnny Sutton, former U.S. attorney, is joining us as well. So, gentlemen, welcome. Johnny, especially, welcome back to the show.
Good to see y'all. Thanks for having me back.
All right.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, we enjoyed the first episode, so we thought we'd pick your brain some more.
Sounds great.
Let's kind of pick up a little bit where we left off last time, or not where we left off as much as a topic we hit. We talked about the First Amendment and free speech, and what does it mean? I don't know that we went into what it means. We talked about healthy discourse, but when you hear somebody talk about the First Amendment and free speech, what comes to your mind?
Well, I'm not a constitutional scholar, but I mean, I kind of think the first thing that comes to my mind is the old-fashioned way. This is America. We get to say what we want. I mean, the First Amendment basically limits government's ability to curtail speech. And I think it's probably the First and Second Amendment are probably the most important rights we have, because if you're not free to speak, you're really not free to think. And, there's been times, even recently in the country, it just seems like you couldn't say things out loud for fear that people were going to hate on you and try to cancel you. And if you can't say things out loud, and, I think it's a recipe for disaster. One is, when there's bad speech, we need to confront it. If someone's got a terrible idea, we need to confront it and explain why it's not a good idea and why people shouldn't follow it. And I think the more free speech we have, I'm almost a free speech absolutist. I mean, you can't incite violence, you can't go out and do encourage terrorist activities. But aside from some kind of violent thing, I think it's one of the most important rights we have. And I think it seems to be coming back. I don't know. Y'all have a finger on the pulse more than I do, but it feels like the country's backlashing from some of the oh, we can't hear these arguments. It's just too much. We're going to just cancel you for saying something.
What about Johnny, where you have like, because it's more than just freedom of speech. The First Amendment has a number of things. Freedom of speech is one, freedom of assembly, freedom of the press. I think religion's in there, right petitions in there, but like the press in particular, like has become an industry, a for-profit industry, and so you see that there are people where the press goes out and it doesn't matter which side you're on, they'll eviscerate the other side, and do so without the same level of seemingly, I don't know this to be true, but seemingly not the same level of rigor that the press had had, times past. Is that just me being kind of an idealist? Like things were pretty ugly in revolutionary times in terms of name calling and all
Right.
character assassination. Has that always been the case, or was there actually a golden age of the press really being a fourth pillar and having some rigor, or is that just me being an optimist?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I kind of feel it that way too. It seems like when we were growing up, maybe it was a golden age and maybe we were naive that the press was in the tank and we just didn't know it. But it didn't feel like it feel like reporting was just trying to get facts. There was an opinion in news every night. And of course, it just seems like the business model isn't broken like it is now, where they're looking for clicks. The most, the scariest, most over the top thing is what gets you the clicks. So then it, instead of like getting the news, getting the facts accurately, people are trying to be outrageous. And it does feel like there is serious bias. I've always felt it as a conservative. I mean, being in a presidential campaign and governor campaigns, it was just amazing how the press was just universally against us. Um, Maybe that's not fair. Maybe that's in my mind, but I think it's bad. Now, of course, back in Jefferson and Adams, I mean, those guys had their own newspapers that hated the other side, and but you kind of knew what the angle was. Now you got papers pretending to be impartial when it's obvious to anybody that they're not.
Did that really come about when the because it used to be you had to have both sides got equal time inside of a media outlet. Was that the big change from your perspective as looking at the law?
I think that's one pretty huge change, which is in the past, a reporter would get both sides of the story. They'd sort of hear, and even if one side was a little bit crazy, they'd at least report what they're saying. I think now so many of these reporters have graduated from elite schools with ideologies that seem to go to one side, that there really is no other side to this argument. There's only this side, and if we give the other side any time, all we're doing is giving oxygen to whatever name they're calling people these days. And I think that's wrong. And I think we're seeing some of the backlash from it right now with
Yeah.
some far right folks that have gotten traction on the internet. And these were people that they really stomped down and tried to put out of business. And now it seems, I don't follow it as closely as many, but it seems like some of these folks are coming back with a vengeance.
It was a
Yeah, I think
different channel, type of channel management um, through the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Every major city had at least two newspapers. The Boston Globe and the Boston Herald. One came at
Right.
it. The Globe was a little more dominant. They were more liberal. The Herald was kind of the upstart conservative guys, a little grittier. I think New York had a half a dozen or so. There was good money in newspaper. The money was in newspapers, right? There
Right.
was, Murdoch and Hearst and all those guys made their fortunes in newspapers. When the fortunes moved to TV, that's when things really started to change. And now the key thing was, not only do I want an audience, I want a specific kind of audience that I can present to my advertisers who are going to pay me a lot of money to deliver, a million or more people a night for this particular thing. And it's just feeding on itself. It's feeding on
Yeah.
itself, and it's going to kill itself eventually,
Yeah.
because we're not believing what we see. Someone said it earlier. They're coming off as if they're non-biased, but you can clearly see that they are biased. So I think it's going to kill itself in the long run. I don't know what that definition is, a long run, but I can see that coming.
No, I think that's right. If you look at the polls and what the American public's opinion is towards media. It's extremely low. Now it's extremely low against a lot of folks, politicians and others. But yeah, I think they've lost a lot of credibility. And I've been arguing for years. There's gold nuggets all over the ground, and the media is not picking up any of them. And now finally, some of these bloggers and YouTubers are picking them up. But of course, then they're connecting dots that are not there. And that's I mean, to me, there's all these interesting stories that just don't get reported very much, and and now you've got these bloggers and YouTubers picking them up, but they're not sophisticated enough or good enough researchers to see what's true and what's not. And I'm not big on conspiracy theories. I worked in government for 21 years. I don't have a lot of confidence that the government could hold together a secret or a conspiracy for 5 minutes, much less 60 years, 20, 30, 60 years. So
So wait,
um,
so you've never been to Area 51?
I've never been there, not yet. I need to
All right.
go. I mean, I spent a lot of time out in West Texas, and I've been to, see the Marfa Lights 8 times, and I've only seen them once. A lot of people went out there and they thought they saw them. Those were just the car lights on the highway. When you see them, you're going to know you saw them.
That's
All right,
awesome.
John went to aliens. I went to JFK. I
Right,
wanted that, but we probably don't need to open that can of worms. But that's
right.
where I was going to go.
Randy, you made a note when we were prepping for today about what's fair on social media as far as the First Amendment, where people's rights to, I don't know if those are privacy rights or what the case may be, but like social media has really changed the game for free speech, hasn't it?
Yeah, I mean,
Are you talking to me? No, I'm sorry.
well, I think you, Johnny. What is fair game on social media?
Well, it's a hard question, and I gave a talk this week at the University of Texas LBJ school, and one person asked a question about that, what social media means, and here I'm kind of an old guy at this point, and I'm like, hey, look, get outside and see the sun and play in the grass and talk to your friends. But in the world that so many of these kids are in, that's just not even an option. I mean, there's these just geniuses that are developing algorithms and developing techniques that are just so highly addictive, and I myself am addicted. I mean, it's when YouTube came out, I really thought YouTube was heaven. I mean, this is what heaven is going to be like. You're going to be able to go and say, I want to go back in time and see what the battle of the Nile was, with Napoleon, whatever. I want to see what in YouTube, there's so many, at the beginning, there were so many cameras out, something could happen. Literally, you could see 50 angles of the event yourself in live time. Now, unfortunately, they've killed all that. And, a lot of that stuff that was there is gone. But I mean, I think the answer is it's going to be rough, and I'm not sure how to do it. I mean, I really am proud of guys like you that are experienced and not just crazy bomb throwers, actually trying to have good discussions that are healthy and do research and be fact based. And I think in the end that's going to work. Although, you know, people are like, Johnny, you're so naive. They want to hear what they want to hear, and they're not going to hear anything else. I think that's wrong. I think human beings are tough-minded, and they may not want to hear it, but I think they want to hear the truth. And the question is, how do you find that? And it's a challenge.
Yeah, and once you've convinced somebody of something, what I just heard this recently, and it made so much sense, or was so obvious once they heard it. And I wish I could give credit to the proper source, but it was something along the lines of, it's much easier to convince somebody of a lie than to convince them that they've been lied to. And
Well,
when I
that's
heard it, I
right.
was like, wow, that's really is true.
I think it is true, and that's my experience. I mean, when these tragic things happen, I was a prosecutor for many years, and I saw so many, murders and just horrible events, children being killed, and it was just, it's very sad, and especially in murders, people don't want to believe that some schmo can kill, some president of the United States, that some dummy kid can go get his grandfather's deer rifle and kill Charlie Kirk. I mean, it's just, that it just seems impossible that that could happen. But unfortunately, I mean, World War I started by a ridiculous assassination, where and it was a comedy of errors. My understanding is they tried to kill this, the Duke for several minutes and couldn't do it, and then all of a sudden they were depressed and they looked outside and there he was, just parked on the side of the street. So our minds don't want to accept that. We like conspiracy, and I'm not sure why.
All right. Well, what would you like to see? And we hit on this on episode 1 a little bit, but healthy discourse. What would you like to see, and what should that look like? I think it's worth.
It's funny. We were talking about this on I guess it was, when was that, Tuesday night, at the LBJ school, and I mean, one of the things that first came to mind for me when, people are saying, well, how do I have healthy discourse? First thing that came into my mind is curiosity. And I'm an extrovert, and I really enjoy talking to people. I enjoy finding out about them. The first question that I ask somebody is, hey, where are you from? And they'll say this town. A lot of times they'll say, well, I'm from Austin. And I'll say, oh, really? Where'd you go to high school? And they said, oh, well, I went to high school in Vermont. I moved here 3 years ago, which of course I said, well, you're not actually from Austin, but there's a reason why they didn't want us, a lot of people, but I don't care where they're from. I'm interested where you're from and where you went to high school and learning a little bit about you and talking about you. And, people love to talk about their favorite subjects, which is themselves. And I think when you start a conversation and you get to know people, it's so much easier to have dialogue, because a lot of times we don't know anything about the other side, and a lot of times we're talking anonymously online, and that's the very worst way to have discussions. I don't like to have discussions in writing. I like to have discussions in person, and if you can't do it in person, do it on the phone. And I that's the first thing that comes to mind for me. But I just I don't know. For me, it's getting to know people. I don't believe in there's such a thing as quality time. I think there's only quantity time. But of course, that's hard to do when you're, um, in a hurried rush society. And of course, the other thing is my experience is you can't really win arguments. You have an argument, you can't really win. I mean, even if you win, you may have won the argument, but you lost the friend. And so I have a tendency in conversations to plant seeds, just to open their mind to think about something. And then they can go home and say, is that possibly true what that crazy guy said? And then when they start to do the research, God, that turns out that was true. Maybe I don't understand this subject as well as I thought. But and of course, so much of it's just having a good attitude, not being hateful, not using name calling, and not thinking of your opponent as evil.
I think questions too. I was talking to my son yesterday, and he asked a question about somebody who was really grading online, and he's like, "How do I, like, what's the right way to engage, and how do I, like, how can I be helpful without trolling?" And there's this really interesting conversation, and you know, questions. People don't ask questions in that way very often, do they?
You know, why are people so angry about whatever the topic is? I mean, I don't know. I mean, Johnny and I are probably close in age. Um, I just don't remember this type of anger between political parties. And my
Hmm.
hypothesis, it's the government's fault because they've created such a divide that they've forced us into tribes and they're mad at each other. They're angry. They got nothing good to say about the other one. And it's been this way for 20 plus years now. And I think it's just fostering this unreasonable anger that makes us deaf to anything anybody says.
Yeah.
I mean, I always tell the story. My father was a politician, a ran for selectman of a small town back in outside of Boston, and he was best friends with the guy he ran against. My dad was a Republican in Massachusetts of
Right.
all things, and Mr. Sirianni was a Democrat. They were they hung out at the Sons of Italy together. They
Right.
they went out boating together. It was like, okay, whatever. They had completely different views on how the government should run and all that, but it just wasn't that kind of anger. Tip O'Neill and Reagan are probably the most famous example
Yeah.
of two politicians who couldn't have come from more different background and beliefs, but somehow figured out how to work together. So I just don't know where it came from. I hope we can solve it. That's all
And
I can say about it.
Anthony, you're talking about like they're forcing us into two political parties or trying to, and I agree with that. Um, I don't fit in either one of those political parties. I really don't like either one of them very much, right? And I agree with the left on some things. I agree with the right on some things, but lots
Yeah,
of things I don't agree with either one. But you're right; they're trying to force us into the two, and it's similar. Johnny was mentioning the media earlier, how it's there's the right and the left, and the same thing. It's like he was saying how they can't have equal time. Like I don't feel like I'm represented at all if I watch it, right? Like because it's not even having two sides because I just don't. People are messy. We don't fit into those buckets that cleanly. But for whatever reason, they're trying to force us into them.
Well, not for
Yeah, I
whatever
think
reason, Randy, for advertising reasons. I mean, I think that's you got to follow the money a little bit, and I think, and it's an important lens for people because, if people have motives, that's okay. Like, I think very few people in the world are not conflicted at all, but like, at least for me, when I watch the news, like, I at least want to understand the motives and where they're coming from.
yeah, no, I think all of that is right, and I think um, there's a big group of people, and I may be kind of in this group on the conservative side, which is you feel like you know you just want to kind of have your kids go to a good school and live in a decent house and have a decent job and you live in a safe neighborhood and live a normal life. And I feel like a lot of people like, what happened to our normal lives, and of course I grew up in Houston, Texas, where it was a very diverse city of all kinds of things with a very large, I'm sure that some people might disagree, but at least in the world I was in, it was a live and let live society way, way back. And it was kind of when you come to Texas, just work hard and don't scare the horses, you're going to get along just fine. And but now, people want to force your nose into whatever they're doing. And in the past, like you were saying, you could, Anthony, you could agree to disagree. Those guys didn't agree, but they could have dinner together. It was no problem. And that's the
yeah,
experience I had in the Harris County DA's office. I was in trial all the time with my friends, and they were duking it out, and they were defense lawyers making my life miserable, and sometimes accusing me of stuff. And but after it was all over, we'd go have dinner, and I say, "Hey, that was kind of nasty. You accusing me of lying?" And he's like, "What are you talking about? I got no defense at all. My guy confessed. You got him on video. I'm just doing the best I can." And so but again, you knew each other. And I think what happened in Congress is because of travel, a lot of guys don't live in Washington. In the old days, I think they did at least spend a lot of the week there, and they would all go, they'd live together, they'd go to dinner together, and they were friends. And now it's just siloed. And we do have to find a way to fix that. And a lot of people call me and say, Johnny, you're a reasonable conservative. Please explain this stuff. Where do I go to find decent, accurate news? And of course, it's a hard question to answer because you got to read 20 different things, and also I have friends that I call.
But I think the other thing you said that's really important is we also have to make room for other points of view, like that live and let live. Like I think that's a
Yep.
part of it too. Is I yesterday talking to my son, he was like, engaging with some people that like there was one way, there was only one way, that was the way, and I think that's a pretty tough world to live in. And by the way, I used to live in that world. I used to be the guy that there was one way of seeing the world, and this way that I saw
Right.
the world. And I mean, looking back on it, wasn't my finest point of view.
Yeah. Well, and a big part of, and I've changed a lot in that way too. I came out of the rough world of super competitive sports where we were there to do one thing, win national championships. So it was serious business, and we weren't always the friendliest to people around us. And in the DA's office, it was the same thing. Somebody had gotten murdered, and this was serious business. But later in life, I got into Al-Anon, and I don't know if we need to explain to your listeners what
I know
Al-Anon
what it is,
is.
but let's say it anyway.
But anyway, Al-Anon is basically a 12-step program for the loved ones of alcoholics. If you have an alcoholic dad or a sister or brother or wife or girlfriend or whatever. Um, and I learned so much in that to one, to mellow me out, two, to get humble. And they give you these little tools like when you're in an argument, to saying something as simple as, you know what, you may be right. You may be right. If you could just say those simple words, a lot
Mhm.
of times that will keep things on track as opposed to, you're an effing idiot and you don't know what you're talking about. That doesn't get anywhere. And I think we need to get a little bit back to that. But again, the business model is not excited about that. They want to debate. They want somebody to be crushed. They want, just the crazies on both sides. Although I think people are getting tired of that. And that's why you see guys like Joe Rogan and other podcasters having 3-hour discussions, with Bernie Sanders or, some politician who's never in their life talked to somebody for 3 hours and
Right.
had it recorded.
Oh my gosh, you just made me think of that old Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, The Running Man, talking about someone getting crushed and like making it great TV, and
Right.
how just ridiculous that was when the movie came out, like how just
Right.
over the top fantastical, and
Yeah.
it's maybe
And they
not
just
that.
remade it, by the way, with Glenn Powell. I haven't seen it yet, but it's been remade.
All right.
Yeah, that argument, it makes me think of, I used to watch ESPN a lot, and ESPN turned into a lot of this, just two people taking sides and arguing and not having intelligent points, frankly. And
Mhm.
I haven't watched ESPN in years. Like I might turn on a game that's on, but watching their regular programming, I mean, it went from probably my number one station I watched to almost not on my radar, other than games, because they've taken that approach too. Like it's just,
Yeah.
it's not interesting to me, right? So
No, I feel the same way. I used to love watching the recaps and the great, they had those great announcers that would make those recaps so fun. But
yeah,
now it's just people arguing about some stupid thing that doesn't even really have to do with the game half the time.
right,
And
absolutely.
Stuart Scott was so great. I want him back.
Yeah.
Cool on
Maybe
the
There
other
was,
side of the pillow.
that's
yeah,
right.
there was some stars back in the day.
So, all right, let's transition to government overreach, and civil liberties versus national security. I think that's a real debate, and you know, take the
Randy, you're not the political guy. It's like, yeah, I'm not right. I'm not left. I'm not center. We're going to start with not just government reach, overreach. I love it.
well. I tend to think I tend to want a smaller government, John. If you've never noticed.
I, I might have picked up on that at some point.
Yeah. Well, look, I'm Johnny doesn't know me as well as you guys, but I am definitely a freedom maximalist, a free speech maximalist. I mean, freedom and sovereignty are really, really core to my being and my belief system. But I've watched El Salvador really interestingly the last few years. I mean, El Salvador was, I believe, the most dangerous country, highest murder rate in the world. And they elected Bukele, who has come in, and he's been basically a dictator in a lot of ways, kind of a benevolent dictator, but he's come in and just started locking up everybody. He just filled the prisons. And in the process, they they took all of these people that probably are innocent. Like I don't know what percentage, but it's not 0% that they're just in solving the problem they had overkill. And my core is like, oh, we can't put innocent people in prison. But as somebody that went to El Salvador and watching what it's done, I don't know, like thousands and thousands of fewer people are dying now, and it's went from super dangerous to super safe, right? Like
Yeah.
safer than the U.S. now.
See,
So,
Yeah.
unless you're one of the guys who's innocent in prison, that doesn't seem very
well,
safe.
yeah. So that's an extreme example, but I think we're, to a lesser extent, I think we're battling the same problem in America, right?
Yep.
And at what point? I mean, I don't know. I'll stop there. I'll let you talk.
Yeah, well, we go through this cycle about every 40 years, and I'm not saying I don't know enough about El Salvador. My instinct on what's happening down there is they had a gigantic gang problem. I mean, they had criminal gangs that were basically taking over the country, and they just said, you know what? If you're in this gang, you're a criminal. We think you're participating in criminal conspiracies that are killing people and doing all kinds of bad stuff, and you're going to prison. Um, that couldn't happen in the United States because we had to be able to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that you committed a crime. But back in the the 70s and 80s. I think we talked about this maybe last time. I mean, Houston was the murder capital of the United States, or close to it, back in the late 70s. And people just got sick and tired of it. And they decided we're going to build some prisons and we're not going to let these people get, if they get 10 years in prison, they get 10 months there. It's a revolving door. And we're going to start prosecuting, especially violent criminals. And once they started locking up murderers and aggravated robbers, people that are using guns and knives to kill people and rob people and rape and kidnap people, those guys started getting hammered with 20, 30, 40, 50-year sentences where you had to do 50% of your time. So these bad guys were completely taken off the street, and we saw the crime rate just drop like a rock in the 90s. I mean, it was incredible, and it's pretty much still low. I know there's a few cities that have ticked up, especially after COVID, during COVID and after. I mean, COVID, the crime went down because no one was on the street, but it works. The problem is, Randy, just like you said, you can't overstep it, and then all of a sudden the government goes too far. And I mean, I lived it. I mean, I was in Houston when the black community was complaining. Why is there a drug dealer standing in front of my house? Why are there prostitutes when I'm trying to walk my kids to the bus stop? This is ridiculous. This wouldn't happen in the rich part of town. And then the police started coming in there and hammering those drug dealers and arresting those prostitutes and cleaning it up. But then it would go further and further and get worse to where people were just getting stopped for riding their bike in the neighborhood. And if they found an illegal gun or crack pipe, they were arresting them. And then all of a sudden the community would say, well, we didn't, we wanted you to get the drug dealer with a gun, not the dummy kid who's riding his 10 speed and happened to have a crack pipe in his pocket.
Well,
So
we're in the same place now with the immigration situation. It's
we are.
exactly the same place.
No, it's
Um,
definitely the same place, and you're going to see. I think that's what President Trump is doing. You're going to see a very aggressive, and what he's doing now is he's arresting all the felons and departing people who've been previously deported or they have a felony conviction. They are aggressively arresting them and taking them out. And once those folks are gone, and of course in the old days you get deported and you come back right back and nothing would happen. Sometimes people be deported 2 and 3 times and arrested again and nothing happened. What they're doing now is they're prosecuting those folks and also deporting the ones that haven't necessarily committed a new crime, but they've got a criminal record and they're illegal and they're not going to stay.
yeah, but we're also running into sweeping up, guys that have been here for 8 years, at the Home Depot looking to be a contractor, go do some roofing.
Yep.
Yes, they're here illegal, but they're not a menace to society. In fact, they're contributing to society and may likely paying taxes. And so
Yep.
that if and unfortunately, a lot of it has to do with non-cooperation by local governments, which is making it more difficult. That problem's got to get solved because everyone agrees. No one disagrees that the worst of the worst need to go. But you know, there are certain people in government, in power in this particular government that feel like overreach is the only way to go. I guess,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Well, and that's the challenge, is identifying who are the really bad actors who are dangerous and getting them first, as opposed to the guy who's, you know, never committed a crime in his life. He's the hardest worker, you've ever seen in your life. So that is the challenge. I'm less worried about the person who's been here 8 years than I am about the person who's been here 30 and
Right.
has, a bunch of American kids and all those things. But on the other hand, we've just got to find a way to fix this. And um, I don't know. I think they're starting by just stopping the bleeding and stopping the flow, getting the most dangerous out, and then they'll start evaluating, okay, how are we going to do this? Who goes? But even if you've been here a long time, I mean, you forgot the advantages of, you've learned English, you probably made a lot of money. It's not the worst thing in the world to go back for everyone. But I agree with
Right.
you. It's, there's certain people who, they've committed the crime of coming in the country illegally, but other than that, they've been model citizens. And
Right.
that's the challenge, is how do you identify those people where we might kind of get them on some legal status versus other people who really need to go back. And it's a challenge. I like the old days better when, there were folks who would come across just for the season. The Mexican worker, the men would come across, they'd work the season, and then they'd go back and they'd make more in 5 months than they could make in 4 years in Mexico. And it was
Right.
pretty good. And that's what, that's the guest worker program. A lot of people don't like that, but there's got to be some legal way where we can let these people come and work and then go back, because they're not going to become permanent citizens illegally, and they're not going to vote, and that is a non-starter for conservatives.
Maybe there's a way for their existing employer um, to sponsor them in some way. And um, we did that at our company. We sponsored a guy from Mexico, and got him his working papers, and he can be here now for 5 years and then become a citizen and all that. So it can be done. We just got to
Hmm.
have discourse, right? We have to have some dialogue about this thing and stop yelling at each other and say, you know what? There's a couple of million here that are pretty valuable to us in various ways. Whether it's
Well, and I
building
think,
houses
and
or
no, it's right, but I think there's some real anger on the conservative side, because look, we've got big hearts and all those things. We don't want to ruin someone's life, but on the other hand, the idea that you just let 20 million people into the country when all
yep.
these people all over the country are trying to get in legally, and it's and of course that's the other thing is, if you're in a place like Maine or Nebraska or Utah, and you've been in this city for all these years. Your grandfather went to this kindergarten, your dad went to this kindergarten, you went to this kindergarten. You're sending your kid to the kindergarten, and 80% of class doesn't speak a word of English. 2 years later, I mean, that's a giant problem. And it's nothing against those little kids. I mean, those kids didn't do anything. They're just little kids. But it's just, there's got to be some order on how immigration works. And that order has not been here. And I think, the president is trying to fix that.
It's just like what we were talking about earlier. It's extremes again. We talked about it,
Yep.
right and left in media, but like nobody seems to be able to have a nuanced conversation. It's either one side is saying, look at all these rapists and killers, and they make all of them seem extreme, and the other side's like, they're just working and building houses, and the truth is it's a lot messier than that, right? Like some of
Yeah.
the people are
No.
rapists and murderers, and some of them are just contributing to society, and then there's a whole bunch of people everywhere on the
Well, we're
spectrum.
we're back to discourse, right? Like I think the reality is that real discourse means being able to have a nuanced conversation. And a lot of people, I don't know if it's unwilling or not skilled at doing it, but it doesn't seem popular to do, or we don't want to take the time to do it. But there's a whole lot of questions under like when do you close the door on immigration? Was it after the Pilgrims? Like, because that would have been bad for my family. Like, so I don't know. I think from my, again, just this is just my perspective, trying to stay pretty apolitical about the whole thing, is like, how do you find a way to honor the foundations that the framers put into the country? How do you try to draw a little bit more nuanced lines in the conversation so that people aren't brushing massive broad strokes? And Randy, to your point about being kind of like on the kind of small air libertarian side, like if someone's going to participate in the school systems, cool. If they're going to participate in our healthcare system, cool. Just pay taxes like the rest of the people do to support that. Like, participate equally. That's like cool. Like I don't know.
Yeah,
That's
I think social media is again we blame everything on social media, but I kind of think rightfully so a lot of times. Like I really think it is highly responsible for this and the loss of the nuance, right? Because it used to be, Anthony's example of his dad and the other guy, you were in the same town. You almost were forced to be friends with these people. On social
Mhm.
media, you can go and it doesn't matter what idea you have, whether it's agrees with 90% of the world or 1% of the world. Even if it's 1%, you can find an echo chamber of a whole bunch of people that will agree and reinforce. And I think that has really crushed. It's like that muscle hasn't been built and isn't necessary for people to build the way it once was. It's my take on it, and I'm going to stick with my
Yeah.
story that it's social media's fault.
I think that's a big
I'll,
part of it. That's a big part of it. And unfortunately, with AI and all this stuff, we're really heading in uncharted waters. And I don't know how we get there. And I don't want to be draconian about phones, but of course, the studies are showing that these kids are really addicted to their phones. Pornography is a giant problem. Kids aren't getting married. They don't feel like they can ever afford a house. I mean, there's just some hopelessness. And then, they get on their phone and they can at least enjoy whatever they're doing, playing a game, watching their favorite music video or whatever. I mean, it's a challenge, but I do think that we can train our kids and ourselves to have good conversations and to, learn etiquette and be gentlemen and not insult people and say you may be right, and even though we know they're not right in our heads, and continue that conversation. But it's hard to do, and a lot of times, I'm in these organizations that are very bipartisan. I have a lot of friends across the aisle, and when I'm talking to them about complicated conservative situations, sometimes they just give me a pat on the head and said, "Oh, you're so cute," and that's the other problem from the conservative side, because the culture is pretty much liberal in the media. Conservatives speak fluent and liberal just by osmosis, but most liberals do not speak conservative at all. And they'll say, well, I watch Fox News occasionally. And I was like, well, that's probably not where you should be picking up your policy. I mean, they're throwing
But
the
in,
bombs
in
over
but in
there.
but in fairness, I'd say that I know a lot of conservatives who don't speak liberal either. Like
That's true.
I think so. Like maybe we shouldn't call that a right or left issue. That's a polarization issue, right? Like the further out you go on the wings, the less likely you are to speak the language of the other. Probably,
Yeah,
maybe,
I guess that, I
maybe,
think
maybe
that's
you're right, Johnny. Maybe
I
you're right.
think I think it's right, but it's just, yeah, you might be right. I think that's right, but I think that the difference is we grew up in, all kind of watching the same media, and then we didn't realize, we thought Walter Cronkite was this grandpa who was just conservative, good grandpa who was, rock solid Christian, all these things, and it turns out he was very far on the left. He just kind of kept it together, and I guess what I'm talking about fluency is, you know, nobody is reading, National Review or, First Things, where everyone is getting a dose of the New York Times or whatever setting. My Google News comes to me every time I open my computer. You just get it. When I have to go other places, and especially in the religious world, that's another big change that's happening, is there's
Yeah.
so much fewer Christians, and a lot of the younger people, they just have no Christian foundation, which was another place that, was teaching you to love your enemy and, feed the poor and visit the imprisoned. I mean, all these tough things. But on the other side, they were saying, hey, you can't get divorced. I mean, you can't have sex before you're married. I mean, these are things that just seem ridiculously old fashioned. But basically, most Christians believed that for 2,000 years up until 5 minutes ago.
I think next time I want to get into like the Fourth Amendment, and we can talk about like the separation of church and state and how those things are important for discourse. I think that's amazing. It's giant. I think there's, we've got a list of 10 more topics for 10 more shows with you. Really excited to have you back today and excited to continue the conversation as we talk about how to hopefully raise the level of conversation in the country.
Yeah, no, it's my pleasure. This is always fun. I really enjoy talking to y'all, so I'm happy to do it anytime.
Yeah, love the wisdom. So love the wisdom.
Thanks, John. It was nice meeting you.
All right.
Nice meeting you.
Yes, and listeners, thank you for supporting us. Tell your friends, tell your family, download wherever you get podcasts. Anthony wants to make sure everybody goes to listens to us on YouTube. He wants
And
100,000 people
subscribe when you go there. Subscribe. Yep.
subscribe. Follow us on YouTube. But wherever, if you go to
YouTube's
Apple,
YouTube's the future.
yes, Apple, Spotify, whatever, or go to talesofabundance.com. So thank you, gentlemen. It's been great.
Y'all
Awesome.
have a great day.
Thanks, Johnny.
Bye.
Listen and subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Click follow for more content like this, or go to talesofabundance.com to join our community and get free tools.